Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. This is wide receiver Herman Moore. If you asked most Lions fans who the greatest receiver in the history of the franchise was, and you told them that they couldn't pick Calvin Johnson, odds are they would point to this man right here. Moore was one of the best and most dominant receivers in football throughout the mid-1990s. The Lions made a lot of quality first-round picks around this time, from Johnny Morton to Robert Porcher to the incomparable Barry Sanders, and Herman Moore is right up there among the best first-round picks that the team has ever made. And while you probably know about his greatness and how dominant he was, what you might not know is how ridiculously bizarre the start of his career truly was. At the start of the 1991 season, he was atrocious. He couldn't catch a football, he couldn't crack his way into the starting lineup, and couldn't do anything right. And the reason why? He was blind. Seriously, the Lions drafted a receiver that legitimately could not see the football. And this is the story behind that. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context to understand why the Detroit Lions drafted him in the first place, and why the Lions were so concerned with his lack of immediate production. During the turn of the decade as we headed into the 1990s, there were few receivers in all of college football who were better, more dynamic, and more productive than Herman Moore. The Virginia wideout was a critical part in the Cavalier offense, and if you needed a big play, you could be sure that Moore was going to be the one to give it to you. In 1988, he led the ACC in yards per reception. He followed that up in 1989 by, once again, leading the ACC in yards per reception, and followed that up in 1990 by, you guessed it, leading the ACC in yards per reception. Not only did he lead the ACC in this category in 3 consecutive seasons, and not only is he the all-time leader in conference history in this category with an astonishing 22 yards per catch, but to this day, he is the only player in ACC history to lead the conference in this category 3 times. He had a knack for finding the end zone, finishing 5th in receiving touchdowns in 1988, 3rd in receiving touchdowns in 1989, and 1st in receiving touchdowns in 1990. Moore was the first player in Virginia history and the only one in the 20th century to ever lead the conference in receiving touchdowns. He had a knack for getting yards, finishing 10th in receiving yards in 1988, 3rd in receiving yards in 1989, and 1st in receiving yards in 1990. Along with ranking 4th in the NCAA that season, he became the first player in Virginia history to have over 1,000 yards receiving, as he finished the year with 1,190 yards. Moore was a dominant receiver who was a consensus All-America pick in 1990 and finished 6th in the Heisman voting. Virginia quarterback Sean Moore, who was 4th in the Heisman voting that year, threw 21 touchdown passes, and Moore caught 13 of them, or a hair below 62%. If you were to pick a random touchdown pass that Moore threw, there was a greater than 3 in 5 chance that it was a touchdown to Herman Moore. And because of his strong play, Virginia was actually winning games. They went 10-3 in 1989, which was the first time they'd ever finished the season with double-digit wins, and their number 18 ranking at the end of the season was their highest since 1951, when they finished 13th. And in 1990, they went 8-4, finishing inside the top 25 for the second straight season, making it the first time ever that Virginia finished inside the top 25 in back-to-back years. It was clear that heading into the 1991 NFL Draft, Moore was going to be a hot commodity. And there was one team that desperately needed him. By no means did the Detroit Lions have a bad passing offense in 1990. Their offense in the run and shoot was incredible, finishing 5th in points scored and averaging over 23 points per game. Considering the fact that they were dead last in 1988, the jump up from 28th to 5th in just 2 years is an insane improvement. And again, their passing game was fine. They were inside the top half of the league in passing yards, passing touchdowns, and yards per attempt. Yes, the Lions struggled and finished the season with a 6-10 record. And while the passing game could have been a bit better, by no means was it bad or in desperation mode. However, there was one glaring weakness with their passing game. They didn't really have a big receiver. A lot of their receivers were on the shorter side of things, so they didn't have a jump ball guy or a guy that you could just toss it up to and throw it to. As tight ends coach Charlie Sanders said, and as head coach Wayne Fontes said, they had a bunch of midgets on the field. Again, their words, not mine. Detroit's leading receiver in 1990 was Robert Clark, who finished the year with a very respectable 52 receptions for 914 yards and 8 touchdowns. He was actually 6th in receiving touchdowns and 5th in yards per catch that season, so he was a solid player. The only problem? He was 5'11". The next leading receiver was Richard Johnson, who had 727 yards and had over 1,000 yards in 1989. He was 5'7". The next leading player listed as a wide receiver was Aubrey Matthews. He was 5'8". Excluding Terry Greer, because he was going to be 34 years old in 1991 and was retiring, the next leading player was Jeff Campbell, who was 5'7". He was followed by Mike Farr, who was 5'10", and by Jason Phillips, who was 5'7". You can see how this might be a problem. The Lions did not have a single receiver on their team above 6 feet. if they wanted to go deep and throw a jump ball to someone, they did not have that guy. And especially since they spent a first-round pick on Andre Ware in 1990 and wanted to give him as much help at receiver as possible, a guy like that who towers over opposing cornerbacks seems like a good idea. With that, when the 1991 NFL Draft rolled around, after the first 9 guys taken were either all defenders or offensive linemen, the Lions decided to pull the trigger on a guy at the skills position. They took Virginia wideout Herman Moore and made him the first receiver chosen in the draft. The 6'4" player was immediately the favorite to be the star in Detroit's offense and slide right into a starting spot. The only problem? It didn't quite work out that way at first. Again, you would think that Moore would be made a starter right away. First-round picks at the receiver position normally get some good playing time in their first year. None were taken in 1990, so I can't use that as an example for perspective. But in 1989, there were 3 receivers taken in the first round. When the Patriots spent a first-round pick on Oklahoma State wideout Hartley Dykes, the Colts spent a first-round pick on Miami wideout Andre Rison, and the Falcons spent a first-round pick on Northern Arizona wideout Sean Collins. None of them were drafted as high as Moore was, and none of them were top 10 picks, or relatively close to being that. Yet they all started a lot in their first year, with Rison starting 13 games, and Collins started all 16 games for the Falcons. Why would a 6'4" receiver, when he's practically the only guy with that frame on the team, and when he was a first-round pick that the team was obviously high on, not be able to crack the starting lineup? Simple. He couldn't catch the football. No one really knew what the problem was, because his hands were not an issue at Virginia. He was as sure-handed as they came. That was one of the many reasons why the Lions, along with so many other teams in the league, fell in love with him. But now, with Detroit, he couldn't hold on to anything during training camp and during the preseason. It was like the Lions were getting a completely different player than the one they drafted. It was like someone else swapped bodies with the real Herman Moore. Naturally, the coaching staff was alarmed at this. Charlie Sanders, who is now coaching the receivers after coaching the tight ends during each of the past 2 years, was approached by head coach Wayne Fontes about what the heck was going on with Moore. Fontes said about the practices and the depth chart, "Every time I look up, I see these midgets on the field, and it's kind of a problem. We've got this 6'4" athlete we drafted in the first round, and I'm wondering what the problem is." Naturally, Sanders responded by saying that the rookie wasn't ready yet, but both Sanders and Fontes knew that something was up. Something had to be up, because these seem to go beyond your typical rookie struggles. That's when they realized something incredible, and something that seems insane. Herman Moore was basically blind. After days upon days of Moore dropping passes and looking relatively inept at the receiver position, the coaches decided that they needed to get his eyes checked, just to see what was going on. Turns out, he was blind. He didn't wear glasses, he didn't wear contacts, he couldn't see, and had absolutely nothing whatsoever to help out his vision. Now you might be asking yourself a very important and very obvious question. If he couldn't see, then how the heck was he any good in college? His eyesight didn't just get shot overnight. How could he make catch after catch in college, and yet couldn't even see the football in the pros? Well, I've heard conflicting reports about this. According to Sanders, for whatever reason, Moore just didn't want to wear contacts in the pros. Maybe he was worried about getting hit a lot, and a lot more violently, to the point where he would lose his contacts and didn't want to have to deal with that. Maybe he thought they were uncomfortable or didn't feel right. But according to Sanders, Moore wore contacts in college, but just didn't feel like doing it at the next level. According to a separate report, Moore didn't wear contacts in college, but was able to succeed because the college balls had white stripes on them. That contrast on the ball allowed him to track the football and know where it was, allowing him to make catch after catch. The professional footballs are different than the college footballs in terms of how they look, and that contrast on the college balls that did not exist on the professional balls made his life that much harder. Whatever the reason was, at least there was a very easy solution to the problem. Moore just needed to be able to see the football. Oddly enough, this is not the first time I've done a video on something like this, as I talked about Hall of Famer and legendary Dolphins quarterback Bob Greasy being named a first-team All-Pro in 1977 after a horrible 1976 season, simply because his vision was poor and he realized that he needed glasses. You can learn more about that crazy situation by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But now, at least the Lions knew what the problem was, and that it was incredibly fixable. As long as Moore had something where he'd be able to see the football, he should be able to live up to the expectations and play like a first-round pick. Safe to say, he did just that, and then some. As I said at the top of the video, if we exclude Calvin Johnson for very obvious reasons, just because he's that much better than everyone else to ever play receiver for Detroit, most people would say that Herman Moore is the greatest receiver in the history of the franchise. Better than Gail Cogdale, better than Johnny Morton, better than Cloyce Box or Leonard Thompson or anyone. Moore was the cream of the crop. After not doing a whole lot as a rookie, primarily because he couldn't see for a good chunk of that year, he had slightly under 1,000 yards receiving in 1992 and 1993. And then came the mid-90s, and that's when Moore became one of the best receivers in the game, and quite possibly the best receiver in football not named Jerry Rice. In 1994, he made it to the first Pro Bowl of his career after crossing 1,000 yards for the first time ever, as well as recording 11 touchdowns, which ranked third in the league. In 1995, he had 123 receptions, which was an NFL record at the time for the most receptions in a single season by any player. The record stood until 2002, when Indianapolis Colts receiver Marvin Harrison broke it with 143. He also finished that season as a Pro Bowler and a first-team All-Pro, finishing third in receiving yards and fourth in receiving touchdowns. And in 1996 and 1997, he got 2 more Pro Bowl appearances and 2 more first-team All-Pro nominations, as he finished second in 1996 with 106 receptions and first in 1997 with 104 receptions. To date, he is the only player in Lions history to have multiple seasons where he led the league in receptions. By the time his career with the Lions ended after the 2001 season, he had 670 receptions for 9,174 yards and 62 touchdowns. He is a franchise legend, and I think that goes without saying. But it's amazing how close he would have been to becoming a legendary bust instead of a legendary player if he never got that eye test and never got contacts. So what's the moral of the story here? Get your vision checked out. If something seems off and you feel like your vision is worsening, talk to someone about it and do what you can to fix the problem. Because for Herman Moore, this vision has saved his career and helped establish him as one of the best players in all of football throughout the 1990s. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9, and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.